So you have in the Capitol a sort of permanent police presence. So when an election dispute might come up, just hypothetically, I mean, I don't want to be a big pessimist, and I'm going to pretend for the rest of the duration that the Democrats do have a chance of winning, and they might win the next election. I just don't think they're ever going to take power, because this is what's going to happen. Because I think this coup is going to go off a lot smoother than the last one.
So that is Bill Maher during the most recent episode of Real Time with Bill Maher, sounding the alarm with a chilling prediction or a chilling concern that he has that Donald Trump's recent developments with respect to Washington, D.C. and other blue cities and blue states are a prelude to delegitimizing the 2026 midterms or the 2028 presidential election and seizing power for himself. Pretty disturbing, but before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, those of you who watch my channel know that I have mixed feelings about Bill Maher. I disagree with him on his culture war takes. I think he's much too preoccupied with that nonsense, and I think he's too generous with giving the right the benefit of the doubt on culture war issues. Having said that, when it comes to recognizing that Donald Trump is objectively worse than any elected Democrat, no matter how progressive they are in Bill Maher's eyes, he's been pretty consistent. He's even been consistent about the threat Trump poses, even after having that wildly controversial private dinner with him at the White House. Many people understandably feared that the closer Maher got literally to Trump, that what would happen is the same thing that happened so many times in the past, which is these people get bamboozled by Trump, or they love being so close to power that they soften their criticism of Trump and then become basically either neutral or eventually make their way to becoming a MAGA-adjacent ally. Bill Maher, whether you like it or not, has not done that. Ever since that dinner many months ago, Bill Maher has continued to relentlessly criticize Donald Trump. He's called him stupid and corrupt and authoritarian and dedicates most of his political commentary to emphasizing the dangers of Donald Trump and the Trump administration. So this seems to be a rare case of a political commentator, who you may or may not like, actually staying true to their values. Donald Trump is worse than the Democrats. I support the Democrats. And Bill Maher says that even after having dinner with Trump and reportedly even criticizing Trump to his face. Okay. So having said that, he still has credibility with me when it comes to his Trump criticisms. And he also makes the case that he was ahead of the curve compared to most mainstream media, pundits, journalists, and commentators when it came to Trump's authoritarianism in the past.
I don't know if I was the first one to use the phrase slow-moving coup. I know I was using it before he was... Thank you. I know I was using it before he was president the first time, so maybe somebody got to it first, I don't know. And people were laughing at it. I mean, whenever I said he was never going to concede power, they would say, oh, you smoke too much pot. Well, it turned out I smoked just the right amount of pot.
So I think it's fair to say that Bill Maher has credibility on this issue when it comes to predicting Donald Trump's worst impulses and most authoritarian tendencies. It's just absolutely the case. The problem is, to the extent that we can predict future performance, the past is the best we have. And when Donald Trump was in power last, he made attempts, unlawful attempts, both with respect to the fake electors plot, which preceded January 6th, and then, of course, we had the January 6th insurrection. Donald Trump made two very dangerous, unlawful, unconstitutional attempts to remain in power. So why shouldn't we believe that he'll try it again?
What's going on in Washington, D.C.? I'll ask you this first, because he does this magic trick. You know, he's passing out pizza, and it's all about big balls, and we're all laughing at what's going on in D.C. Yeah, he's passing out pizza to the troops. If there was a slow-moving coup, let me just describe some of the steps, and you tell me if I'm being paranoid. First, create a masked police force. Get people used to looking at that. Normalize snatching people off the street. Get them used to that. Normalize seeing the National Guard and the military on the street. Then start talking about crime in the Capitol, which is basically, you know, has always been a fairly crime-ridden city. This is our nation's capital where elections are decided. And then have, because the crime is so bad, have other states start sending their troops, not just the National Guard there in D.C., but now at least 6 other states are sending their troops, which...
And so we'll stop right there because there have been subsequent developments with respect to this, and we'll actually talk about that in a separate video. But at the time of the taping of this episode of Real Time with Bill Maher, it is true that other Republican-led states were sending hundreds of National Guard troops to reinforce the D.C. National Guard in Washington, D.C., even though it was just objectively unnecessary. It is true, as I've said before, that Washington, D.C. has a crime problem. Anyone who tells you otherwise is a liar, but nobody's telling you that. What they have been telling you is that crime has been on the decline in Washington, D.C. It was in decline last year under President Biden. It was in decline this year under Donald Trump, and actually Trump had previously boasted about that fact. Crime is down in D.C., but then he reversed himself whenever it was convenient, whenever he wanted to once again test his authoritarian muscle, his authoritarian instincts by using the National Guard in what he considers to be a blue liberal city. He did it with Los Angeles back in like March, and now he's doing it with Washington, D.C. here. Again, it's another dress rehearsal. So unless the D.C. National Guard is being overrun by criminals, and Trump is saying that's not the case. As a matter of fact, Trump is saying the Guard are here and the crime is just dead in this country or in this city. If that's the case, then why are these states sending their own National Guard troops to Washington, D.C.? It's unnecessary, right? It's a show of force. It's a show of force. It's not about resolving crime in D.C. It's about telling the residents of D.C., and by extension, other blue cities and other blue states, that the southern Republican states in particular will mobilize behind Donald Trump. That is what Bill Maher is talking about.
Then Trump can then federalize. So you're having many states' troops on the ground there, and now they're under federal control. So you have in the Capitol.
And then it goes back to the clip I showed you at the beginning. This is what Bill Maher is worried about. And I think he has every right to be concerned. And I think the rest of us do as well. I think this is absolutely the case. I think we should this is a 5-alarm fire. This is a red alert moment. And the Republicans don't care. As a matter of fact, they're cheering it on. We're going to take a look at an article in just a second, kind of breaking down why this seems to be an assault designed ultimately towards elections. But I want to play one last clip of Bill Maher here.
I'm just going to reiterate the one thing I said here that I think is being passed over here. He's creating an army in the nation's capital, not just of D.C. police, but they happen to all be southern states, Operation Happy Coincidence. And I just think the presence now of this army in Washington is going to have its toll taken when the next election comes around. Because, we have a very asymmetrical way of doing elections. When the Democrats lose, it's like, oh, we lost, enjoy. When the Republicans lose, they don't do that.
They don't do that, certainly not in the age of Trump. And it doesn't seem very likely that they're going to reverse on that particular trajectory. So this is really ominous, really dangerous stuff. And again, I think Bill Maher has a degree of credibility here, at least potentially with the right, because again, he expected this stuff and he was calling this stuff out years before the January 6th insurrection. He was calling this out during the first Trump administration. Hey, this guy's an authoritarian. He's probably not going to give up power. So I want to take a look at this op-ed in the New York Times by a political scientist breaking down Donald Trump's authoritarian maneuvers with respect to the deployment of the National Guard. So this is how you disenfranchise voters with the provocation of Jim Crow-era water hoses and violence. Once you see these pieces of the pattern, the president's decision to once again send the National Guard to occupy an American city, this time Washington, D.C., takes on a different valence. Trump has long taken a special interest in crime, real or imagined, happening in Oakland, California, Washington, Chicago, New York, and Los Angeles. These are places that run up the Democrats' tallies during national elections. They also have black mayors. By sending in the National Guard or threatening to, is he bullying a black-led city or punishing a city that did not vote for him or getting ahead on intimidating voters ahead of election season? We can't know why for certain, but we don't need to know or agree on a why to know that whatever the reason, it's a part of the pattern. All of these things, executive orders, gerrymandering, a favorable Supreme Court, a legislation-happy state legislatures, and a National Guard presence matter as much as their implementation because the pattern can reveal intention. Taken together, a reasonable person can conclude that the right is enacting a coherent strategic plan to make midterm elections appear fair, even if they're designed so that Republicans will almost surely win. The Democratic Party has little in the way of a cohesive strategy to respond, not just to the midterms, but also to the very idea of U.S. election safeguards. Should it pack the court, propose its own legislative agenda for elections? For Democrats, at least, it's unclear what they want voters to demand. This is bringing a knife to a gunfight. This is looking at the sky for fireworks when the bullet casings are landing at your feet. It's worth noting that co-opting voting rights look like this is not a historical aberration. Lobbyists, policy wonks, and other non-governmental actors have co-written papers like Project 2025 to influence the law for a long time. But that's exactly the point. The reversal of civil liberties, the activist court that clearly articulated white Christian fascist rhetoric, none of it is historical aberration. If we can say that FDR's political ideology was organized under a single banner and even give it a name, the New Deal, it is notable that we will not say that Project 2025 is Trump's political ideology. This is true in almost all major areas of policy, including electoral governance. We don't win anything by pretending that a pattern is not there. Whether Americans can elect a majority of Democrats in the midterms or stop Trump from running for an unconstitutional third term, what matters is that one political party is waging war on free and fair elections. Sometimes we get lost in debating definitions. Is this authoritarian or fascist or politics as usual? Definitions matter, but sometimes political patterns are so violent, so grossly immoral, that we should absolutely pay attention to them, even if the obvious name for them terrifies us, especially if it terrifies us. The pattern also tells us something about what will matter in the future. The president may use executive orders for political spin. They may be alternatively silly, unconstitutional, and incoherent. But they are also data points in a bigger state of play than this administration or this midterm. Before the 2020 election, Trump told a crowd of supporters that if they voted for him, they wouldn't have to vote again. Was it a joke? Was it literal? Was it sarcastic? Those are only the wrong questions. The only question is, does it matter? And I think that is a really good op-ed you should definitely check out. And again, speaks to the anxieties, the perfectly reasonable anxieties that Bill Maher and this political scientist and so many others, myself included, have about Donald Trump's moves as a prelude to obstructing or undermining the next election. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.